Hello everyone, this is Mrs. Fry, and today's video is going to be about solving quadratic equations by factoring. Before we left school, we were learning about how to graph quadratic equations. And as you can see here, I have a graph of a quadratic equation. The quadratic equation forms a very specific shape called a parabola. The parabola is this U shape that you see here. And I have some characteristics of the graph already labeled for you. We were already learning about this before we left school. First thing that I want to point out is the vertex point. The vertex point is either the absolute highest point or the absolute lowest point on the graph. As you can see, I have that labeled down here at the bottom, the vertex point. Then we have the axis of symmetry, that's the dotted line. The axis of symmetry is the line in which the graph is symmetric about, and the vertex point will lie on that axis of symmetry. Then we have the y-intercept. That's the point in which the graph crosses the y-axis. And then finally we have the x-intercepts, and that's what our big focus is going to be on today, is these x-intercepts, where the graph crosses the x-axis. Because when you're solving a quadratic equation, you're basically looking for the roots or the zeros, which we call the x-intercepts, where the graph crosses the x-axis. Okay, so there's a couple different ways that we can find the x-intercepts, and one of those ways is just by graphing. So let's kind of review what we were learning last week. Graph the following equation, then identify the x-intercepts. My equation is x squared plus 4x plus 3. Now I have labeled here AOS. That stands for axis of symmetry. And there's a formula that we'll use to find the axis of symmetry. The formula is x equals negative b over 2a. Now a and b come from the equation. A would be 1. That's the number with x squared, and b would be 4. So I'll just take those numbers and plug into my equation. So it would be like this, negative 4 over 2 times 1. So that's negative 4 over 2, which is negative 2. Now the axis of symmetry, that also happens to be the x-coordinate of the vertex, which would be negative 2. The vertex is a point, remember? So I'm going to write it as an ordered pair, negative 2, comma, and then we still don't know what the y-coordinate of the vertex is yet. I don't think I'm going to have enough room there. Let me erase that. Okay, so to figure out the y-coordinate of the vertex, we'll go back to our equation. Y equals x squared plus 4x plus 3. And we're going to take out the x and replace with negative 2. So that makes it negative 2 squared plus 4 times negative 2 plus 3. I'm solving this. So y equals 4 minus 8 plus 3. So that's negative 4 plus 3, which is negative 1. So the vertex is negative 2, negative 1. The other thing I want to point out is your y-intercept. I'll write this up here because I kind of ran out of space down there. The y-intercept comes from the c value, which is the last number, because this equation is written in standard form. The standard form of a quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, so the y-intercept here comes from that last number, which is 3. So I'd write that as an ordered pair, 0, 3. Okay, so now we've got a good bit of information here, so we can set up a table of values, and the table of values is how we're gonna make our graph. So to make a table, I'm gonna have to scroll this down a little bit so we can see it. I'll put x, y, it's kind of like a T chart, and we want this to be centered around the vertex. The vertex is negative 2, negative 1, so I'll put that in the middle, negative 2, negative 1. Now for the x column, the numbers have to go in order. So I think what number comes after negative 2? That would be negative 1, and then 0. Then what number comes before negative 2? That would be negative 3 and negative 4. Now to find out the numbers in the y column, we have to solve. And the way we're going to solve is we're going to go back to our equation from the very beginning. Y equals x squared plus 4x plus 3. And we're going to plug in those numbers to see what they equal. So I can take, first of all, I don't need to solve all of these. I do notice that I have a 0 on the x column side, and the y-intercept is 0, 3. So that must mean that this last ordered pair would be 0, 3. That's your y-intercept. Let's label these. This is the vertex. This is the y-intercept. This will come in handy when we're graphing. And then another thing I want to point out about a quadratic is that it's symmetric. You know, we had that axis of symmetry, the dotted line. And if it's symmetric, that means if this last point, the y-coordinate is 3, for the first point, that y-coordinate would also be 3. Okay, I can tell that by symmetry. So I really just need to solve for one of these because these two y-coordinates will be the same. So I can use my equation, y equals x squared plus 4x plus 3. I'll take out the x and I'll replace with -1. So y equals -1 squared plus 4 times -1 plus 3. So that's y equals 1 minus 4 plus 3. So that's -3 plus 3, which is 0. So these 2 points are going to be 0. Now, what I'm going to do with this chart is I'm going to plot these points over here. I should have set this up a little bit better. Let me go ahead and put some hatch marks on here. It's going to be a 5 by 5 graph. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I can plot the points. I'm going to switch this back to red. -4, 3. So we count to the left 4, up 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. So that's my first point. -3, 0. 1, 2, 3. 0 is right there on the x-axis. -2, -1, that's my vertex. Left 2, down 1. -1, 0, that's right there on the x-axis. And then 0, 3, that's the y-intercept. Okay, so you can see this forms a really nicely shaped parabola. Nice U-shape. Basic quadratic function. Now our solution, that's my x-intercepts. That's what I just highlighted in yellow there. So my x-intercepts are -3, 0. -3, 0. And -1, 0. So we can say our solutions are -3 and -1. We're going to write our solution set in a brace, -3, -1. Okay, now that just took a really long time to figure out just two little answers. Graphing is a way to solve this problem, to find the solutions, but it's not the most efficient way because you're not always going to have the time or the space to make a graph. So what we can do instead of graphing is we can find the x-intercepts using factoring. We learned about factoring way back in October, I think. So we have learned about this. So identify the x-intercepts using factoring. So this is the same problem that I did above, and I'm going to show you how to factor it. Basically, all you have to do is it's going to split into the product of two binomials. That's two sets of parentheses. Also, you want your equation to be set equal to 0. So we're going to split it into two blank parentheses. Now, this is the type of factoring that I called guess and check, where you want to write a list of your factors for that last number. So basically think what multiplies to equal 3. That's just 1 times 3. Okay, so this is our factors of 3, 1 and 3. And then you want to pick the pair that would also add to equal the middle number, which is 4. And luckily for us, 1 plus 3 does equal 4. So that's how this is going to fit into our parentheses to fill in the blank, you just put x plus 1 and then x plus 3. But remember, our answer from above, the x-intercepts were -1 and -3. So how do we get them to be negative? Well, this is where you're going to set each part equal to 0 and then solve. So x plus 1 equals 0 and x plus 3 equals 0. So subtract 1 from both sides, and we end up with x equals -1. So there's my first answer. And then for the next one, subtract 3 on both sides. So that ends up being x equals -3. And then we write our solution in braces, -1, comma, -3. Okay, let's look at the next problem, something with a little bit larger number. So we've got x squared minus 4x minus 21. So I want to start out by writing down the factors of that last number, factors of 21. So that's 1 and 21. And then we have 3 times 7, okay? So what numbers multiply to equal that? The next thing we're going to look at is the middle number, -4. And then we have to figure out of these two choices, which one would subtract to equal -4. And the way we would make it subtract to equal -4 would be 3 minus 7. 3 minus 7 equals -4. So that's what I'm going to do to fill in the blanks in my parentheses. So that's x plus 3 and then x minus 7. And that equals 0. Then you have to take each part, x plus 3 equals 0, and then x minus 7 equals 0. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. That makes it x equals -3. And then for the other one, add 7 to both sides. So that's x equals 7. So my solution, the point in which they would cross the x-axis would be -3 and 7. I have one more example to show you. This one is x squared minus 12x plus 32. So now I want to make a list for our factors of 32. Okay, so factors of 32. What multiplies to equal 32? 1 times 32, 2 times 16, and 4 times 8. So this is where sometimes people get confused with the signs. I have -12x plus 32. Basically, this is my hint to you. If this last number is positive, you want to think about what numbers would add to equal the middle number. And because the middle number is negative, then both of the signs in the parentheses are going to have to be negative. So I know that -4 and -8, that's going to add to equal -12. So that's how I'm going to plug that into my parentheses. I'll put x minus 4 and then x minus 8. That equals 0. Then I can set each part equal to 0. X minus 4 equals 0. And x minus 8 equals 0. Add 4 to both sides, and that makes it x equals 4. And then add 8 to both sides. That makes it x equals 8. And then you want to put your answer in brackets, 4, 8. Those are your solutions. That's where that graph would cross the x-axis. Now for your homework today, I have 2 problems listed. You're going to solve the quadratic equation using factoring. You can see the 2 problems here. I've got x squared plus 5x minus 24 equals 0. And the other problem says x squared plus 13x plus 36 equals 0. I want you to text your answers on LiveGrades or Remind. You are getting a grade for this by the end of the week. I also had the chance to run the report for the LiveGrades login, and I see that all of you were able to log on to LiveGrades, which means you've all been able to get my messages about signing up for this Remind. If you're missing out on these YouTube videos because you're not signed up for Remind, then you're going to have to catch up on the YouTube videos from last week. You can find those on my YouTube channel, which is Jane Fry. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Stay safe. Bye.